Hey, folks. Welcome to Kaiser's Castle. Tonight I have a great guest, but before I get into announcing him, I want to make sure you guys understand the parameters of this show. The parameters are not about me, it's not about the guest. We're both uh, here in no politics. I don't want to see it in comments. I don't want to hear your comments about anything other than understanding this is a veterans show. Um, if you do comment on those things, I'm going to consider it trolling for this show. Um, I've been a troll before, and I understand, but and I believe in your right to speak. But when it comes time, there's three times when I do shows, I hold something sacred, and I mean this. Your opinions, as well as my opinions, and even my guest opinions, matter not. It's the veterans on every side of both the enemy and the ones who met them on the battlefield that I care about. If they're legit veterans and they have an opinion and they were there, I support that 100% from either direction of the politics of that day. If you weren't there, shut up. That's my opinion. And that's going to be the way I hold the standard for this show. Now, with that being said, I am introducing you today to a fellow PHU member, Pipetters Union member. He was Navy from 79 to 84. He's been a contractor in the aviation and intelligence side since 85. His name's Curt Miles. Great guy, awesome fellow. And with that, brother, if you want to get in any more on your introduction, you're more than welcome to.
Oh no, that's put me up there pretty good.
Cool, cool, bro. Uh, the whole point of this is it's about D-Day. We are now
Yes,
in
sir.
the 75th anniversary. That's a sacred day when we actually there will be a photo that I will put on this show at the for the lead of me and my wife standing at a artillery emplacement at Point to Hall,
Mm,
and I will be playing a Reagan speech during that time. And it's a moving speech. That's why I'm playing it, and it gives out the proper aura. And he even mentions even the enemies. I've met my enemies. I'm sure Curt has. I never had hatred for my former enemies. I've helped to rebuild them, and
mm.
so did we after D-Day. And that's what Americans are. Our politics get put to the side. A veteran does his job. They write a check. Am I incorrect on this, Curt? We both wrote a check to this government at one point, up to and including our very death for this nation.
That's it.
That's right, and
Yes, sir.
that's why it's important, brother. As a quick call me sir, bro. I know you're all proper all the time. That's all good, bro. Um,
Yeah.
this is just like me and you having a normal conversation. But the point is, the awesome point is that we liberated a continent, and that's a fact.
Yep.
Um, because of that fact, we were also able to join with our fellow enemies and rebuild them. And, you know, people can argue this, that, and the other, but if they weren't there, I know I went over to Europe in the 80s, and, I saw the new enemy, quote unquote. You know what I'm saying, Curt?
Yes.
But now they're somewhat allies, and people fail to realize the Soviet Union wasn't just Russia, the Rodina. It was Belarus, Ukraine, you know, all those satellite states, plus even East Germany, Poland, which was still under siege. Remember Lech Lewenska back then?
Hmm. Yeah.
So this is the ramifications we actually saw when there was an Iron Curtain during that era. And that's the point I think was so interesting from Reagan's speech in on the 40th anniversary, not the 75th. And that's what the diamond anniversary is, the 75th. I can't remember, Curt.
I thought the 50th was, but I'm not sure either.
Okay, well, somebody can comment on that. I won't consider that trolling. Correct me or anybody on that, but I know it's an important anniversary. Your 25th, your 70 or 50th, your 75th and 100th anniversary. I remember the
Hmm.
bicentennial. Do you remember that back in the 70s, brother?
Yes, I do.
200 years of our Revolutionary War, our veterans from there. I remember the
That was
daughters. Yep.
awesome time.
It was. It was absolutely. I remember. Do you remember they were painting fire hydrants in revolutionary characters back during that time?
Yep, and also quite a few of them that were painted red, white, and blue stripes, and uh, we had it was pretty well celebrated. I'm from the Midwest, of course, a little further west than you are, but they did it up right. We had quite a bit of celebratory colors flying around, and just a lot of goodwill. It seemed like, and people were feeling their pride. Good old American pride at the time.
That's awesome, brother. That I do remember that. I was just a kid though back then. That's what's so
Yep.
funny. Um, oh man, that's the thing. But the institutional memory. I remember back in the 70s, it was not, it was not uncommon to run into World War II or Korean War veterans.
Mm.
And from and even in Ohio where I'm from, there was a large contingent of German Americans, and some
Yep.
of them immigrated here after the war. And so there,
Hmm.
you had at VFWs, it was not uncommon to see an American veteran because remember it's veterans of foreign wars
Yep.
and a German veteran. You know, so and they didn't. You know what's so funny? You have enemies that or that opposed to each other during that time, and I can't remember ever seeing bad blood between an actual enemy. And that was the interesting thing with the speech with Reagan, brother. You had Helmut Kohl, I believe, was
Yep.
the prime minister of Germany at the time.
Hmm.
Uh, I remember the head of the Luftwaffe was a former Air Force. That's their German Air Force was there, and he was a decorated World War II ace. He's the one who came up with that quote with the Americans doing the logistics, the Germans doing the defense, or no, the British doing the defense, and the Germans doing the offense. The Russians wouldn't stand a chance, even though you and I both know with the Russian, what they have, 20 uh, armor divisions in Europe,
Mm.
and we had three.
Yep.
You know, so that was kind of a pipe dream. If Reforger had to actually be in place, Reforger was Return of Forces to Germany, folks. If you didn't know that, if it didn't come in a timely manner, uh, all of Europe would have been overrun by the Soviet Union. I mean, it was a monolith of
Mm.
militaria. That and their satellite nations. You got any comments on that, brother? Coming from the Navy side?
Oh well, it's kind of like the naval part of that era and the ground troop part of that era. It's almost like they were two completely separate wars going on at the same time. The scale and the scope magnitude of each force was just unlike anything we've ever seen in modern times. To I had an uncle that was on Omaha Beach, and he was a very quiet gentleman. He I don't think he suffered from PTSD. I think he was just a quiet guy, but he was always, you could always tell he was thinking. And he told me one time when I was home on leave, he said to look out from conquered ground at the sea of ships. he said, I actually felt sorry for the Germans after what we gave them. And so I look at that, and I look at all the ground troops that flooded Europe and North Africa, just Sicily, Italy, everything, the European continent, all of that. It just amazes me that we were able to field such an enormous fighting force, and in country we really didn't know anything about. I mean, as far as intelligence was concerned, and the intelligence network back then was just something that was cobbled together, by what they considered the best of the best, and it's just amazing where that led. But I don't think a guy can really capture one comment to cover everything about World War II. It's just so just mammoth and diverse. It will take forever to actually cover everything.
Oh, brother, when they come out with the books that show, I mean, in our lifetime, just in our lifetime, you're a tad bit older than me, a couple days older. Um,
Yep.
the interesting thing that I always find is that I can disagree with a veteran on on anything, but there's always the respect there. And
Hmm.
I can honestly say I've never the politic thing. We all know that's that exists, but during a a war situation, it's the man to your right and your left you have to trust. So that shit
Hmm.
goes away.
Yep.
And it used to be that way in America. That's the thing that astonishes me. Now I'm getting into politics, so let me shut my mouth. Anyway, so like I said, it doesn't belong here. I just think those people, as you said, very diverse. Americans shined, the British shined, the Canadians shined, the Polish forces that landed. And with that being said, I'm going to let a guy who everybody, I remember they used to call Ronald Reagan all kinds of names back in the day, but he got it. The Polish forces that served, and people don't even know, there was Poland had fielded a military that actually went to England and went in on D-Day too. And then all of a sudden they got subjugated under the Soviet heel after the war. Um, and Germany got divided. I mean, there was so much geopolitics during that time um, that it amazes me, like you said. And with that being said, I think this is an opportune time. It's about 12 minutes, folks, but please listen to it. I don't care your opinion on Reagan. Just like, honestly, I don't care your opinion on anything other than what the troops did. And I will play President Reagan's address at the ceremony commemorating, and it's at Point Oho. And Point Oho, this was in on the 6th, June 6th, the sixth day in 1984, 40 years after the Normandy invasion. And to have stood on that sacred ground, which that picture will show, we're in front of an embattlement. That place you see Reagan behind, that statue, or whatever you want to call it, the memorial stone, is in danger of falling when we were there, so we couldn't get as close as Reagan did. But if you look at the sheer shift, or the sheer cliffs of that place, it blows you away. And with that being said, I'll keep talking until he talks. I'm playing it right now. I want you to hear what Reagan said. And here it comes,
We're
folks.
here to mark that day in history when the Allied armies joined in battle to reclaim this continent to liberty. For 4 long years, much of Europe had been under a terrible shadow. Free nations had fallen. Jews cried out in the camps. Millions cried out for liberation. Europe was enslaved, and the world prayed for its rescue. Here in Normandy, the rescue began. Here, the Allies stood and fought against tyranny in a giant undertaking unparalleled in human history. We stand on a lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France. The air is soft, but 40 years ago at this moment, the air was dense with smoke and the cries of men, and the air was filled with the crack of rifle fire and the roar of cannon. At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. Their mission was one of the most difficult and daring of the invasion, to climb these sheer and desolate cliffs and take out the enemy guns. The Allies had been told that some of the mightiest of these guns were here, and they would be trained on the beaches to stop the Allied advance. The Rangers looked up and saw the enemy soldiers at the edge of the cliffs shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades, and the American Rangers began to climb. They shot rope ladders over the face of these cliffs and began to pull themselves up. When one Ranger fell, another would take his place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, and held their footing. Soon, one by one, the Rangers pulled themselves over the top, and in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. And behind me is a memorial that symbolizes the Ranger daggers that were thrust into the top of these cliffs. And before me are the men who put them there. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. And these are the heroes who helped end a war. Gentlemen, I look at you and I think of the words of Stephen Spender's poem. You were men who in your, quote, lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor. I think I know what you may be thinking right now, thinking we were just part of a bigger effort. Everyone was brave that day. Well, everyone was. Do you remember the story of Bill Millen of the 51st Highlanders? 40 years ago today, British troops were pinned down near a bridge waiting desperately for help. Suddenly they heard the sound of bagpipes, and some thought they were dreaming. Well, they weren't. They looked up and saw Bill Millen with his bagpipes leading the reinforcements and ignoring the smack of the bullets into the ground around him. Lord Lovat was with him, Lord Lovat of Scotland, who calmly announced when he got to the bridge, "Sorry, I'm a few minutes late," as if he'd been delayed by a traffic jam, when in truth he'd just come from the bloody fighting on Sword Beach, which he and his men had just taken. There was the impossible valor of the Poles, who threw themselves between the enemy and the rest of Europe as the invasion took hold, and the unsurpassed courage of the Canadians, who had already seen the horrors of war on this coast. They knew what awaited them there, but they would not be deterred. And once they hit Juno Beach, they never looked back. All of these men were part of a roll call of honor, with names that spoke of a pride as bright as the colors they bore. The Royal Winnipeg Rifles, Poland's 24th Lancers, the Royal Scots Fusiliers, the Screaming Eagles, the Yeomen of England's armored divisions, the forces of Free France, the Coast Guard's Matchbox Fleet, and you, the American Rangers. 40 summers have passed since the battle that you fought here. You were young the day you took these cliffs. Some of you were hardly more than boys with the deepest joys of life before you. Yet you risked everything here. Why? Why did you do it? Well, what impelled you to put aside the instinct for self-preservation and risk your lives to take these cliffs? What inspired all the men of the armies that met here? We look at you and somehow we know the answer. It was faith and belief. It was loyalty and love. The men of Normandy had faith that what they were doing was right, faith that they fought for all humanity, faith that a just God would grant them mercy on this beachhead or on the next. It was the deep knowledge, and pray God we have not lost it, that there is a profound moral difference between the use of force for liberation and the use of force for conquest. You were here to liberate, not to conquer, and so you and those others did not doubt your cause, and you were right not to doubt. You all knew that some things are worth dying for. One's country is worth dying for, and democracy is worth dying for because it's the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man. All of you loved liberty. All of you were willing to fight tyranny, and you knew the people of your countries were behind you. The Americans who fought here that morning knew word of the invasion was spreading through the darkness back home. They fought or felt in their hearts, though they couldn't know in fact, that in Georgia they were filling the churches at 4 a.m. In Kansas, they were kneeling on their porches and praying. And in Philadelphia, they were ringing the Liberty Bell. Something else helped the men of D-Day: their rock-hard belief that Providence would have a great hand in the events that would unfold here, that God was an ally in this great cause. And so, the night before the invasion, when Colonel Wolverton asked his parachute troops to kneel with him in prayer, he told them, "Do not bow your heads, but look up so you can see God and ask his blessing in what we are about to do." Also that night, General Matthew Ridgway on his cot, listening in the darkness for the promise God made to Joshua, "I will not fail thee nor forsake thee." These are the things that impelled him. These are the things that shaped the unity of the Allies. When the war was over, there were lives to be rebuilt and governments to be returned to the people. There were nations to be reborn. Above all, there was a new peace to be assured. These were huge and daunting tasks, but the Allies summoned strength from the faith, belief, loyalty, and love of those who fell here. They rebuilt a new Europe together. There was first a great reconciliation among those who had been enemies, all of whom had suffered so greatly. The United States did its part, creating the Marshall Plan to help rebuild our allies and our former enemies. The Marshall Plan led to the Atlantic Alliance, a great alliance that serves to this day as our shield for freedom, for prosperity, and for peace. In spite of our great efforts and successes, not all that followed the end of the war was happy or planned. Some liberated countries were lost. The great sadness of this loss echoes down to our own time in the streets of Warsaw, Prague, and East Berlin. The Soviet troops that came to the center of this continent did not leave when peace came. They're still there, uninvited, unwanted, unyielding, almost 40 years after the war. Because of this, Allied forces still stand on this continent. Today, as 40 years ago, our armies are here for only one purpose: to protect and defend democracy. The only territories we hold are memorials like this one and graveyards where our heroes rest. We in America have learned bitter lessons from 2 world wars. It is better to be here ready to protect the peace than to take blind shelter across the sea, rushing to respond only after freedom is lost. We've learned that isolationism never was and never will be an acceptable response to tyrannical governments with an expansionist intent. But we try always to be prepared for peace, prepared to deter aggression, prepared to negotiate the reduction of arms, and yes, prepared to reach out again in the spirit of reconciliation. In truth, there is no reconciliation we would welcome more than a reconciliation with the Soviet Union, so together we can lessen the risks of war now and forever. It's fitting to remember here the great losses also suffered by the Russian people during World War II. 20 million perished. a terrible price that testifies to all the world the necessity of ending war. I tell you from my heart that we in the United States do not want war. We want to wipe from the face of the earth the terrible weapons that man now has in his hands. And I tell you, we're ready to seize that beachhead. We look for some sign from the Soviet Union that they are willing to move forward, that they share our desire and love for peace, and that they will give up the ways of conquest. There must be a changing there that will allow us to turn our hope into action. We will pray forever that someday that changing will come. But for now, particularly today, it is good and fitting to renew our commitment to each other, to our freedom, and to the alliance that protects it. We're bound today by what bound us 40 years ago, the same loyalties, traditions, and beliefs. We're bound by reality. The strength of America's allies is vital to the United States, and the American security guarantee is essential to the continued freedom of Europe's democracies. We were with you then, we're with you now. Your hopes are our hopes, and your destiny is our destiny. Here in this place, where the West held together, let us make a vow to our dead. Let us show them by our actions that we understand what they died for. Let our actions say to them the words for which Matthew Ridgway listened: I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their value, and borne by their memory, let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
See, folks, this is what America is, period. Nobody can doubt. I know it was emotional for me to listen to. Probably the same for you, Curt. And
Yep.
There are certain times that America has held that shining light, and it still does in some ways. And for all the detractors, I don't see a lot of people leaving America, even the people that want to claim this, that, and the other, you know, the activist. Do you, Curt? Do you see people flocking to go overseas and run away from America, or do you see more people wanting to come in?
I see literally thousands of them lining up to get in. I've never seen the lines to get out.
Right. So it's a. Anyways, we're not going to get into that. The point
Sure.
is, for the veterans, we know what sacrifice is. A year after that speech, you stood and raised your right hand and swore your oath. And that oath, it does not have an end except for until death. They didn't say just for this enlistment, you know, you'll support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah.
And follow every, you know, lawful order given to you. And that's the thing that at least at one time, when there was still conscription, we had all political parties united in one thing: Americanism. And that's
Yep.
not a dirty word. That's not a dirty
No.
word. Nationalism is Americanism if you're an American. That means you believe in America. You'll support and defend this nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yep.
And that is where you wrote the check, just like I did, brother. Now, your comments on that, hopefully you could hear that. If you could, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, brother.
Americanism, you know, you've always got somebody out there willing to stir the pot, get something started. But like you said, nationalism is not a bad thing when you're talking about pride in your country. it only makes common sense. I mean, it, if you live in a certain country, you want what's best for your country, your countrymen, everybody involved. So why not for America? We Americans want to be the best all the time. I mean, it's just pride. Uh, we love our country. We love what it stands for, what it was founded for. Um, I'm not a historian. I can't get the dates like a lot of people can. The times and whatnot. But I love to read about history and the things that we did to make America what it is today. And I've actually I found in doing my genealogy a few years back, I found that we were, and I'm not clear on the relation. I know it's not distant, but it's not like third cousin. But we're related to General Nelson A. Miles, who was a an Indian fighter. He was the Army general that Crazy Horse was captured under. He was a Medal of Honor recipient. He was from the that branch of our family that lives in Connecticut. We came from England and landed in Virginia and then went west from there. But a lot of us went north. So, but just reading about his time in the service and the conflicts that took place back then, I've read some books about other nations, and perhaps it's the writer who slanted it one way or another. I don't know, but
Right.
I've never seen anything match what Americans have done, and I don't know if that's a divine thing, if we were just chosen to do that or what. But I wake up every day thankful that I'm an American. I'm grateful for all the opportunities that being an American gives someone. Um, people can say whatever they want, but here's the thing in America: if you have the drive, the idea, if you have the energy, the will to get out there and do whatever it is you want to do, nobody's going to stop you. I mean, everybody's
Yep.
going to encourage you, but nobody's going to stop you. You can you might run into an obstacle here and there, but it's there. And I might add, even the military offers that opportunity. I come from a farming community in Northwest Illinois. I went to high school in a town called Galesburg, Illinois, which by chance was also the site of a prison camp for German soldiers. Believe it or not, um, we still have pictures there in City Hall, I believe, of it was a large research hospital on the northwest side of town, and there's still pictures of German soldiers out there in formation marching around.
Yep.
And but anyway, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity in that area. You were a farmer, you worked in a factory, or that was about it. And it was shortly after the Iranian hostage crisis happened that a bunch of my classmates and we all went down and joined various branches of the military, and it completely changed my life. I went from being pretty much a barefoot hayseed, never being out of the county, to the next minute I'm in another state. The next minute I'm on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. I'm seeing things that I never even knew existed,
Yep.
and getting paid for it too. So
Isn't that the best part of it? I mean, people
yeah,
they just don't get one thing that look, I'm from a trailer park.
yep,
I lived outside a suburb of Columbus called Grove City.
yep,
Um, went to Westland High School. Very mixed thing. Very mixed school. Love everybody I went to school with, It didn't matter. We used to have a term called brobillies and hillbillies.
Yeah.
Brobillies being the blacks that we were fully integrated in a lot of ways. I don't want to get into the whole specifics of everything, but the interesting thing is during the 80s, and you saw this, you know, Michael Jackson was king with Prince and all this stuff. You listen to that music, you saw a full integration of Americans.
Yep.
And there was a patriotism even then, just like you said. Um, that's why I joined. Um,
Right.
it didn't matter. I don't ever remember, and this is something we need to get back to. Yeah, there was never that time when he's a Democrat or he's a Republican, don't talk to him, and vice versa
Mm.
for a female, right?
Right.
And divisivism is the killer, and it's been pushed by academia, in my opinion. But the
Well,
military is the one thing that will stifle that divisivism. And once you've been in the military, you've seen a war, you've seen foreign places. Honestly, I think travel is better than any schooling.
yep.
And I've went to school just like you have.
Mm.
After we got out of school,
Yeah.
we paid for it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but the beautiful part is we see America as America, the reality of it. And it's something, I think it's a Reagan quote, if I'm not misunderstood. Freedom is only one generation away from failing, and
Yep.
it's if it's not passed in the bloodstream if we don't remember. And that's
Yep.
why, as veterans, we have to remember and have to put it down. And I thank God, in all honesty, and I'm so super proud of my son. He joined the Marine Corps, he's doing his part, and I did my part, you did your part. We're all just cogs in the wheel, and people can say, "Oh, it's America's this, that, and the other." And in my opinion, yeah, okay, maybe that's true. But the reality is, what nation's done more for the world
Mm.
for achievements? And you have these people, oh well, we didn't land on the moon or whatever. That's all muff fake. They just put that bullshit out there,
Hmm.
and it's to undermine us. That's my opinion.
Sure.
So
Well,
there,
you've always got that group of people. They just want to. They're not happy unless they can sit back and watch the world burn. I don't understand that mentality. And I don't want to associate this with anything, but I will say this, and feel free to shut me down if I'm going the wrong direction. I live here. I live a mile from Fort Hood. Um,
right,
I do regular business on Fort Hood. I've worked on Fort Hood. I've been in
right,
this area since 1991. I came here with as a contractor with Lockheed Skunk Works, and I came out here on an army gig, and I met my wife, and lo and behold, I'm here. So, but
right.
I've traveled everywhere since then. The one thing about living here at Fort Hood, and this especially hit me at the beginning of the Gulf conflict, Gulf War. Um, I saw a lot of young men come back here in different stages of physical. I don't even know what to say.
Trauma.
Trauma. Yeah, there you go. And I saw a lot of of welcoming, open arms, a lot of love toward these young men and women, and it really made me quite proud. I had some very close personal friendships with some of them, and some of them have not have passed from their injuries or their illness. But I started to see that decay over the years. And the last few years, I've seen a lot of animosity. And I'm certain it's something that has to be, everything has a course. Everything has even life itself is a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I'm sure it's just a phase that we're probably going through, I hope. But I've seen a lot of animosity between veterans and ill will between some veterans, and it's really just a very painful thing for me to see. I've had it directed at me from other veterans for silly things, and I just, I'd like to remind people that, like you said, at one point in time, we all agreed to raise our hand and stand up for something bigger than us. And personally, I don't care if you were a special forces guy or if you were uh, a cook.
Yeah,
And I'll and if you don't mind, for 1 second, I'll bring up something about that. In World War II, there was a young black man, who was a Navy cook, and you're looking at the 40s. Okay, so you're looking at a black man, uneducated. He didn't have much of an education. He joined the military out of necessity. This guy took it upon himself in the middle of the Pearl Harbor attack. I don't remember the vessel he was on, but he took it upon himself to leave relative safety of his battle station and go up on deck in the midst of that horror.
and man of 50.
Man of 50, and didn't even know how to run the thing. And let me tell you, he let the Japanese know what he was all about that day.
Yes, he did. I know the story.
Doris Miller, and he is from Waco, Texas, about 45 miles from north of here. And there's a monument to him there. And he went on to continue his naval service, and I believe it was 9 months later that he was killed in an attack.
Yep.
In the Pacific. But you know, I I have nothing but respect. I know quite a few of those guys that are the silent, professionals that are, you know, these are some of the most highly trained and probably lethal people on earth.
The alpha meat eaters. Yes, you do.
Yes, I know quite a few. Matter of fact, one lives right down the street from me. But
Yep.
to me, it really doesn't matter what you did. I look at all veterans with respect. They gave of themselves to something bigger than they were. Um, I still, I'm 58 years old. I still get choked up when I see the colors, and
Me too.
I've seen a lot less of the colors in the last 20 years. It really, I've even been told that not to fly mine. I do it anyway. So
Yeah, I
uh,
fly. I fly colors daily. It
yes.
doesn't. It's a part of my house. Kaiser's
Mm-hmm.
Castle, brother,
Yeah.
flies the stars and stripes.
I was home on leave. I had what they call HARP duty, which is home area recruiting program or something, where I came home for 30 days and was helped to recruit people.
Right.
And it was uh, it was a Saturday night. My dad was a guitar player. He had a band, and he was playing at the American Legion. So I went down there, and I literally didn't have any clothes to wear. I wore my uniform, my Cracker Jacks, Popeye suit, and I walk in the door, and everybody just jumped on me. It was like incredible amount of love coming my way, and I didn't buy a thing all night, but um, I recall my uncle, one of my uncles. I had four uncles that were in World War II, and the eldest, he was the guy that was on Omaha, and he was sitting there, and I saddled up next to him, and I looked over at him. I said, "How you doing, Unc?" And he just kind of looked at me, give me that stare that uncles do, annoying nephews, and I said, I just thought maybe I'd come in here and drink you under the table. And he just looked at me, and he looked at the
Yep.
bartender. He said, "Set him up." It was about 3 hours later, he fireman carried me out to my vehicle where I spent the night. But
Yeah,
just I
don't do that now. They'll arrest you because you got
oh
care of your keys. They'll say you were intending to drive even though you're sleeping. Yeah, I get it, bro.
yeah, just those guys from World War II. I mean, I love all veterans. They each have their own story. They each have their own era. But I have a soft spot for those guys. They were just hell on wheels, and uh,
Unedited.
oh yeah. They just like it didn't matter where you want me to go. Just point the direction. That's where I'm headed, and
Yep.
the stories that come out of that is just that's my favorite thing to watch. Is like the Audie Murphy to Hell and Back. Um,
And the thing that most young people don't realize, Audie Murphy looked young in that film, but
yes,
he actually did his own story.
yes,
And
yeah,
the other funny one that people don't see is when what's his name, Marcus Luttrell,
yeah.
did his story, Alpha Meat Eater that he is. Um,
Lone Survivor.
yeah, Lone Survivor.
Hmm.
He actually did a cameo there, and that's his story. And
Yep.
a lot, Hollywood. I hate Hollywood because of how they depict war, because it's
Yes.
not realistic. But um, some stories, some sometimes when you have actually met Medal of Honor people, their stories beat anything Hollywood can come up with.
Right.
And it's because you don't get that Medal of Honor without somebody witnessing it
Mm-mm.
and telling your story to somebody else.
Right. Right.
That's not a gimme anymore. It was in the Civil War, it was in certain other wars, but it became something real in World War One.
Mm.
And so since that time, the Medal of Honor has meant something.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I've been fortunate. I've met several Medal of Honor winners in my lifetime. And
Mm-hmm.
I even met one before he ever won it. So, anyways, it's all bullshit. But it's, we're just bullshitting as brothers. Look,
Yep.
here's the point of my show. I'm glad you're on it, brother. I welcome it because you're a steady voice. We've talked for a long time. Um, and you're a steady voice, a reasoned voice. And don't ever worry, I would never cut you off because we're not doing anything. I even edited myself on politics because I just don't want to get into it because that's not what this day is about.
No.
It's about the veterans. And like I said in the beginning, uh, 3 days. All I ask out of 365 days, 3 days. Memorial Day, the day that D-Day happened, and if I do a show on that, and Veterans Day, which I try to do whenever I can if I'm still in country.
Mm.
11/11/11/11, they're sacred days, all three of them.
Yep. Yep.
And I mean that in the purest sense. And I just don't trifle with that. And hopefully you understand. Well, I know you understand what I'm saying. I'm just telling you that's why I'm such a stickler on those days, brother.
Nothing wrong with that, and the alongside of that, I I appreciate that more now as an older man than I understood as a young guy. But being a little bit I don't even know the word, I guess dramatic maybe in your feelings toward your country. There's nothing wrong with that. I like I said, I still get choked up when I see the colors waving, and I know what those colors stand for, what how they were bought too, and it wasn't cheap.
Yeah, they were paid for
And
by human life.
exactly, as a matter of fact, I own the house here in Killeen that the son of George S. Patton, uh, George S. Patton Jr. He was the commander of Second Armor out here at Fort Hood, and I bought his house.
Right.
It's just a house, nothing special. But I came home one day, and there's this little. Shortly after we bought it, there's this little old lady standing in my driveway taking pictures of my house.
Right.
And across the street were these two really huge guys with very mysterious bulges in their suit coats.
Right.
But I pulled up there and I got out. I approached her. I said, "Ma'am, can I help you?" And she said, "Well, I used to live here, and I just wanted to take some pictures." And I said, "Well, I'm in the middle of remodeling from the last owner." I said, "But you're welcome to come in." And she declined graciously, but I said, "Well, you know that General Patton used to own this house," and she said, "Yes, I'm his wife." And I about fell over. I was like, "Wow,
That's
what an
lovely.
honor," And it turned out my wife went to school with her daughter Helen. Um, but we stood there and talked. She was just as kind and sweet, and she had a lot of things to say, and I just stood there dumbfounded that a hick like me could ever talk to somebody like this. But
Yep.
she elaborated that her husband was an intensely patriotic man, and that he loved his time in the military, and he was everything that a Patton should be. And I'm still to this day I take a little bit of extra care around the house because I feel like maybe I need to. But um, I guess I just like to remind everybody that we're so fortunate, just so blessed to be born in this country, and I hope that they will never forget the sacrifice that all those men and women gave fighting for freedom, not just for us, but for all people. But to me, that's what the Veterans Day, Memorial Day, D-Day, that's what those are all about to me.
Yep. And I'll tell you, that is the way we're going to close this show. And I can't think of a more fitting owner of that house than you, brother. Just
Well, thank
knowing
you.
you and for the time we've known each other, um, uh, that is a story I've never heard. And like I said, folks, this is how it works. This is how I run. It's a conversation between brothers, and you get to eavesdrop in on it. And hopefully, you get something from it. And remember, young men that listen, it's always my purpose. Be the best you can be. Don't listen to anybody that can say you'll never do that. I come from a trailer park. Curt says he comes from a hayseed barefoot hick existence in Illinois. And yet, if you knew the man and his epicness, you would understand. Hard men come sometimes even during soft times. We live in soft times now, but hard men have to stand up and stand up for their nation at points. And with that being said, honestly, I thank all of you on this fireside chat with Curt. that I've been blessed to have on this sacred day. And I made sure to do this early enough to point out one thing. I know what it felt like for me and my brothers in MP Company, First FSSG, when we got mobilized in August 2nd after the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein. And we got mobilized to go to the Persian Gulf and ended up in Saudi Arabia. You know, medals mean nothing to me. The defense of Saudi Arabia, the Kuwaiti Liberation Medal, none of that shit means anything to me. The point is, and it probably doesn't to most veterans, honestly, those medals really, your brothers earned them. You didn't. You just get given them, okay? Even if you did stuff, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. The point is, the fear every one of us thought, are we going to go into a hot war at that time? Are we going to have an issue? That's the actual point of that. And with that being said, that is what a veteran does. He goes into an unknown situation willing to exert the United States agenda, what needs to be happen. So thank you for sitting on my big orange couch at Kaiser's Castle, drinking your tea, your coffee, your soda, pop, whatever you want to call it, your adult libation. And during this time, I want to thank Curt on the end and be very clear that thank you for sitting on my big orange couch. With that being said, Shuff out.